Hello and welcome to this weekend's edition of News Now. I'm Nayantara Rai. Our top story is the new twist in the spat between Zee and its investor Invesco. Today, incidentally, marks 29 years of the Zee Group, and CEO of Zee Entertainment, Puneet Goenka, took to Twitter to talk about how it's an emotional moment. But just to bring you and recap all of the developments that have taken place in the last 24 hours. Zee Entertainment on Friday informed the stock exchanges that its board of directors met. Puneet Goenka recused himself from the meeting. The board decided it would be unable to convene an EGM as being requested by Zee Invesco. It went on to also put the ball in the government's court, saying that the reconstitution would be up to the INB ministry and its stamp of approval would be needed. It has followed that up by today moving the Bombay High Court. To make sense of all that's going on and the shareholder activism that we are seeing at Zee Entertainment, we are being joined by Mohit Saraf. He has a new law firm and he's now joining us on this Saturday's edition of News Now. Good evening, Mohit. A pleasure to have you here on ET Now. Shareholder activism. It's a trend that we've been seeing on the uptick when it comes to a couple of corporates recently, but I want to talk to you specifically today about the newest turn when it comes to Zee Entertainment. Now it has moved the Bombay High Court. First it said it cannot call an EGM, it's unable to, it's thrown the ball in the government's court. Now it has moved the Bombay High Court. It has a right to move the Bombay High Court. It has a right to seek legal recourse as well. What do you make of this development?
Invesco actually just requested for an EGM. Under Section 100 of the Companies Act, any shareholder who has 10% and above voting right has a right to call for EGM. Now, when you call for EGM, what does EGM do? It discusses issue. It's a body to deliberate issues. So calling EGM can never be invalid, can never be illegal. And the board has no option but to call the EGM. It's an obligation on the board to call. Because what the board is saying is 10% and more shareholders want to discuss this issue. They are substantive shareholder and therefore we need to meet and discuss. That can never be illegal. I think that's the first part of it. Now, Zee understands that this is an obligation of the board. They have said because they are saying they believe that certain resolutions did not meet the requirement of MIB, and therefore they can't call the EGM. That is absolutely incorrect under law. They also understand that NCLT has already opined that it is an obligation on the board to do. And therefore they fear that under Section 98, NCLT actually will call EGM. The NCLT has the power to call EGM under Section 98. So what they did was they tried to go to the court, the High Court, and when they get to NCLT, they say the matter is sub judice, so please defer the date. That is what they have done, because they clearly understand there is a high risk of an EGM being called by the NCLT on the 4th of October, and therefore this is trying to avoid that. I would say that position. And that is the reason why they have gone there, because I think everybody understands not calling an EGM is a blatantly wrong act, not authorized by Companies Act. And using a guideline, MIBB is a guideline, right? It's not a law, it's a guideline.
What is going to do, you can call for an EGM, but as per law, does that EGM actually have to be convened as per law? What is the call on that? And what about this point of Zee saying it's up to the government and the INB ministry to approve a reconstitution of the board?
I think calling EGM does not require anybody's approval. That's very clear. Passing resolution does not require anybody's approval. What is required under Companies Act is the shareholders' approval. And majority of the 18% shareholders are with Invesco. So I think everybody understand that these things are not, MIBB approval is not required. What MIB approval is required is only for changing. And therefore, if you look at the resolution which Invesco has suggested, it is subject to MIB. So therefore, there's no problem at all. And it is standard. that you actually, the shareholders have to approve, then you go to MIB and take the approval. Removal, resignation does not require any approval. And therefore, I think the whole idea that you can't make a change is stretching the law beyond what it is meant to be. And you understand, Antara, that often laws are not drafted appropriately, and therefore it is open to interpretation. And MIBB is really, it's a guideline. It's not a law. It can never override a Companies Act. Companies are governed by the Companies Act and the SEBI regulations, not by this MIBB controlling ministry regulation. That has a very different purpose. So I think, in my view, we understand that there is a challenge. The present promoter, which is only 4% shareholder, does not want to convene a EGM because the majority is not on their side. We understand that issue. And therefore, there is a creative way to avoid it. But again, remember, these are statutory rights for small minority shareholders. Now, to say that you can't do that because you require an MIBB approval, you can't do that because the takeover code will trigger, is, I would say, stretching the law to a different level.
I take your point.
Which it's
right. Right. Okay. With that, Mr. Saraf, we're running out of time, so I'd like to thank you for giving us your time and joining us today live on this weekend's edition of News Now. That's the newest Kahani Mein twist when it comes to Invesco versus Zee Entertainment. It has now reached the Bombay High Court.